Hello, and welcome to Supplement 3 of Super Deep Movie Analysis. I'm actor and screenwriter Lec Zorn, and this is a very special day for me, being a diehard fan of the Rocky series, because today, Wednesday, November the 21st, 2018, Thanksgiving Eve, is the day of the release of the long-awaited Creed 2, which is obviously the second Creed movie and the eighth movie in the Rocky / Creed series. And I regret that my frequent collaborator Michelle Gusso, who joined me for all of the previous Rocky episodes, is not here, and we intended to get together to do an episode, or a supplement at least, on the two Creed trailers, the two trailers for the movie Creed 2, as we did for the original Creed 3 years ago. But we just never got around to getting together when we both had the time to do it. So anyway, Michelle is here in spirit, and hopefully she'll be joining me for the episode on the movie Creed 2, which we'll do probably in a few months. I always wait to see a movie at least 3 or 4 times before I super deep analyze it for one of these episodes. And you know, I will probably see Creed. I saw Creed, the original Creed, twice in the theater, but I want to get the DVD and be able to watch it and rewatch it a few times if necessary, to make sure that I really have a firm grasp before I do an episode on it. But anyway, it's when you're a diehard fan of a series like this, it's always exciting when you get up to the opening day, and I've been counting down the months and days for quite a few months. And I remember right after the original Creed came out 3 years ago, it was originally it originally said somewhere online, I don't remember where, maybe Wikipedia, that Creed 2 was supposed to be out last November. And anyway, it ended up getting delayed, and getting delayed for a full year. I guess part of the delay was that Ryan Coogler, the director and co-screenwriter of the original Creed, had scheduling conflicts, and he ended up giving up the directing duties of this movie, although he did remain on as executive producer. And Stephen Capel Jr., who I'm otherwise unfamiliar with, is the director of Creed 2. But anyway, so Creed 2, it has, like the original Creed, has issued 2 trailers, and I'm going to analyze each of them, like Michelle and I did 3 years ago. And whether it was by accident or by design, I don't know, but like with the original Creed, the first trailer for Creed 2 was somewhat vague, and then the second one gave much more insight into the movie. And maybe that the plan for each movie was to give people like a little bit of a taste, and then a few weeks later more of a taste of it. I remember speculating, back when Michelle and I did that episode on the Creed trailers, that maybe they only planned on issuing 1 trailer but didn't get a good enough reaction to it, so they redid another one. And the internet, one of the many things that the internet has changed is in the importance of trailers. When I was a kid, most of the time, the only time you could see a theatrical trailer was, and I heard them referred to usually as previews back in those days. I didn't start hearing the word trailer until I think the late 90s. But you could only see them most of the time in theaters as part of the coming attractions. Like, you might see 3 or 4 trailers before the movie that you paid to see started, and now you see about 6, 7, 8 trailers without much exaggeration. Um, and you know, that would be the only time you'd see him most of the time. And then I remember the music video TV series Night Tracks, which aired on WTBS, um, and which I watched heavily before I got MTV. On Friday and Saturday nights, they would sometimes show theatrical trailers in you know, during commercial breaks. But now that they're online, you know, people watch them all the time, and you know, when and they get millions of views, some of them do, and when you're really anticipating a movie like I do all the Rocky movies, then you know, you often just watch the trailers over and over, and you know, with great interest, and try to get a feel for the movie. And so, you know, I've watched both of the Creed trailers, you know, probably a dozen times or so, and you know, I think it's given me a pretty good taste of it, of you know, what to expect in the movie. And even though I don't think the trailers are outstanding. I mean, and keep in mind, even if the trailers were awful, I would go see the movie. I'm that much of a diehard fan. But I don't think these are the two of the best trailers I've ever seen. I think of all the Creed trailers, out of the two Creed trailers and the two Creed 2 trailers, I think the best one of the four is the second trailer for the original Creed. I think that was excellent, and the others, they all had good moments, but just I don't think really would have fully charged me up if I weren't already a diehard fan of the series. And I think one thing, those of us who are big Rocky diehards, one thing that really makes the anticipation and build up to these movies so high is that they're so sporadic. You know, some of these bigger series, like the Harry Potter series, for example, some of the others, they have a new sequel every year or two, whereas there have been at least 3 years between every Rocky. And then especially, you know, since, you know, the Rocky 5, they've gotten very sporadic. You know, it took, you know, 16 years until Rocky Balboa, then 9 until Creed, and now another 3 until Creed 2. So that's only three new movies in the series in the last 28 years. So, you know, this is an exciting day for me, and so this is, and it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense, I don't think, to do a review show on the Creed trailers after the movie's already come out. So anyway, here we go. So the first Creed trailer, let me check my notes here. So you start to see Adonis Creed, played by Michael B. Jordan, fall to the canvas as if he's just been knocked down during a match, and then you see him lying in the hospital, and Bianca, his girlfriend from the first movie, played by singer-actress Tessa Thompson, says, "We got this." And then you hear Rocky, you know, amid a few various shots, including one of him again in the cemetery as he was seen in Rocky Balboa and Creed. He says, "In the ring we got rules, outside we got nothing. Life hits you with all these cheap shots. People like me, we live in the past. You got people that need you now." And over that last line, you got people that need you now. You see Adonis with Bianca and their baby, as well as Marianne, played again by Felicia Rashad, Adonis's mother, the widow of Apollo Creed. And it's unknown whether Adonis and Bianca are married or not, but obviously they're still a couple. And right there, that's a parallel to Rocky 2, because it was in Rocky where, you know, Rocky fell in love with Adrian. Rocky fell in love with Adrian, and then in Rocky 2 they got married and had Rocky Jr. And then Rocky goes on to say, "You've got everything to lose. This guy's got nothing to lose." This guy presumably being Adonis's main opponent in this movie. And Adonis says, "I ain't got a choice." And Rocky says, "That's the same thing your father said, and he died right here in my hands. Listen to me, this guy, he's dangerous." Adonis says, but you don't think I can beat him. And then amid, collage of several shots, um, random shots, then Adonis says, I was afraid I couldn't live up to his expectations. And then Bianca says, you don't think you got your validation? Asks, you don't think you got your validation? And then, we see some clips of Adonis training and visiting his father's tombstone, as well as a gigantic drawing of his father on a parking garage. Maybe some sort of, maybe a parking garage to some sort of Apollo Creed Memorial Museum. I'm not sure. I know I grew up about 50 miles from Louisville, Kentucky, the hometown of Muhammad Ali, and there is a museum dedicated to him there. And then, you hear Adonis saying, I want to rewrite history, and I guess he just said it to his mother, and she says, don't pretend this is about your father. And on the screen, the words, then on the screen appear the words, there's more to lose than a title. And Adonis, then you hear Adonis say, it may not seem like it now, but this is more than just a fight. And then you see Adonis and his opponent individually, well, with their entourages entering the ring, but I assume on purpose you don't see, you never get a clear view of the face of Adonis, nor anyone in his entourage. And then while in the ring, then the Adonis opponent turns around and you see the name Drago on the back of his robe, and maybe it's supposed to be something where the audience is supposed to gasp and say, oh my god, he's going to fight a Drago. And that seems to me what they're going for, but the problem with that, if that's what they were going for, is that these days, there's so much advanced information about movies on the internet that I don't know how many people really would be shocked by it, because I already knew for months in advance that Ivan Drago, played by Dolph Lundgren, was going to be in the movie. So it didn't shock me, although the potential for bringing Drago back certainly is very intriguing to me. So anyway, the first trailer, I mean, it's all right. And again, I would see the movie even if the trailer were awful. But basically, it tells me that Adonis is taking the logical next step in his relationship with Bianca, and Rocky seems like more and more he's become a wise old philosopher. And in the early movies, Rocky was portrayed as someone who was probably, I mean, not a moron, but someone who probably had maybe slightly below average intelligence and very below average education, and he had some street smartness, but he would still make some ridiculous comments sometimes that were humorous. And even as recently as Rocky Balboa, just 12 years ago, when Marie mentions that the father of her son Stevenson, or Steps as he was generally referred to in the movie, was Jamaican, and Rocky refers to, and Rocky responds by saying European. And but now Rocky just seems like a wise old philosopher. I mean, obviously he's still unpolished, not well educated, but very wise. And of course, Sylvester Stallone, at now 72 years old, he was 29 when the original Rocky was made. And I just think that it's been really interesting, to watch the growth of the character. I remember thinking right after I saw Rocky Balboa, I wish they'd made it about 10 years earlier to make it more believable that he would actually fight the heavyweight champion of the world, even in just an exhibition. But one interesting thing about doing it when they did, it was 30 years after the original, and I remember thinking it's interesting seeing a character grow over a full generation. And now, in the neighborhood of watching the character grow over two generations. You know, Stallone was 29 when the first Rocky was filmed. He's 72 now, so Stallone now in it, you know, Stallone has played Rocky now while Stallone has been in his 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. So that's that's a long time, and I think the fact that Stallone has continued playing the character shows what a great character he is, and now and that it's such a great character that he doesn't have to fight to still be a great character, and I really believe that Stallone will continue playing Rocky, you know, you know, for the rest of his life. I just think the character is so much a part of the actor, and in fact, Stallone, when accepting his Golden Globe Award for Best Supporting Actor for the movie Creed, Stallone referred to the character Rocky Balboa as, quote, my imaginary friend. And in fact, one thing I've actually found out since the last Rocky is that, since Michelle and I, you know, did our last Rocky-related episode, which was on Creed about 2.5 years ago, that Stallone, you know, at a time when he had $106 in his bank account, was offered $100,000 to buy the rights to Rocky, and he refused. He was determined that he was going to star and play the title character, and I have great respect for Stallone for holding out like that. And you know, it reminds me, you know, of a couple of films that I'm trying to get produced right now, both dramas. One is called 80s Metal Star, one is called Conceived in Love, and yeah, I would never let, you know, the movies be made without me in the starring role, and it's not an ego thing. There are actors certainly who could do a great job in the title, in the main character, in the lead role in those two films, but none of them could feel the character like I can, and that's what's the most important thing to me. So, you know, Stallone, obviously, you know, and by the way, it should be noted that Stallone, after Ryan Coogler and Aaron Covington wrote Creed, Stallone writes this movie with Chio Hodari Coker, who again I'm otherwise unfamiliar with. He's a black man, and I think it's probably good to have. And I try to keep race out of things, you know, any more than I tried to, you know, keep race out of things as much as possible. But you know, this is a lot like the original Creed. You know, this movie, you know, apparently will have a lot, you know, of black culture in it, and I think, you know, sometimes you need somebody who's more familiar with that culture to make it authentic. So, but it's great to have Stallone back writing. You know, he wrote the first 6 Rockies by himself, and so this is the first Rocky movie that, you know, he's been involved in the writing of since Rocky Balboa 12 years ago. And you know, and like, you know, Michelle and I were talking about it, you know, 3 years ago. It's interesting to see Stallone now, being about the same age that Burgess Meredith was in the movies, you know, that he appeared in the series, and that we see that, you know, while Rocky and Mickey are very different characters, that Rocky has moved into the place as the trainer, as the wise old man. And the progression of the character of Rocky has been very logical throughout the entire series. So it's and I think another thing is that Stallone, the older he gets, and I think really it really started the rebirth of his career really started with Rocky Balboa 12 years ago. That was a time when he started to get, you know, into bigger films again, and he started to get more respect again after being a whipping boy of critics for about 20-25 years. And since then, and now he's 72 now, he just seems like he's more concerned about being taken seriously as an artist now, and doing works of quality, you know, doing works that enrich rather than merely entertain. And you know, I think that Stallone is I think he's always been a great actor. I think he's always been an outstanding actor. But there was a time when he just seemed like, okay, he was the number one action star. Well, I mean, I think what happened is because he became the number one action star, he tried to jump on it and just do a lot of films to capitalize on that without thinking about the quality of films that he made. And he certainly made a lot of money doing it, but did not get a lot of respect in the process. And obviously, he's had success, but as most actors, like 99.999% of the other actors, and I certainly speak as one myself, we don't make a lot of money. In fact, we make very little money. We have jobs, aside from acting, to make ends meet. And, if I had the opportunity to make the kind of money that he did making some of those big hit movies in the 80s, I probably would have done it. I don't fault him for that. And at the same time, I do have respect for people such as Christopher Reeve, who took acting so seriously, and he turned down a lot of big roles in exchange for doing a lot of esoteric starving artist type projects, and he never, because of that, he never became the star that he might have been able to otherwise. But certainly he's someone who took acting very seriously, and I respect that, and I respect a lot of the decisions that Stallone made as well. I don't think that one is necessarily a better person or a better actor than the other. It just means that they made different choices, they had different priorities. But I am glad to see that Stallone, as he has gotten older, has become more conscious about the quality of the films that he's done. And I think probably the death of his son Sage back in 2012, really changed Stallone as well, to get him to, it really made him realize the fragility of life, and the need to do as much as you can, while there's still time. So the first trailer, and one other thing I want to say, this is a little bit off the subject, but hopefully close enough that it's appropriate to say here. I think a lot of people, well, let me back up. When you go into film, I always say that when you start working in film, it dramatically changes the way you watch films. And I think a lot of people who've never worked in film, they don't discern well between being a bad actor and being in a bad movie. For example, I remember back when IMDb had their message boards, a lot of people talked about how bad Ralph Macchio's performance is in The Karate Kid Part 3, and I contend there's not a thing wrong with his performance, it's just a very badly written movie. And, if you have a bad script, even if you're the best actor in the world, that, you might do some things to show that you have some acting skill, but you can't make a great movie out of a bad script. Whereas, there are people who are great actors, which I think Ralph Macchio is, and like I think Stallone is, but who have made poor choices, with the roles that they take. And there are people, who make great choices. I mean, Clint Eastwood, for example, some of his films have been more respected than others, but I don't think he's ever done any films that people laugh at, where you mention the title and people snicker. Whereas there are, a few films Stallone has done where that's the case. Like, for example, Stop or My Mom Will Shoot, which, I've never seen, but I would be surprised if I would think it's very good. And so, Stallone, I know for a fact is a great actor. I've seen him give some brilliant performances. And I think a lot of people who think that he's not a great actor are people who, that they've seen some of his not so good movies, and then maybe also because he tends to play characters who aren't very smart, they assume he's not very smart. And of course, one thing I know from being an actor is people are often very different from the characters they play, and people. It's often said that that the nicest people make the best bad guy actors. So, and I've played a lot of bad guys myself, I've played a lot of real scumbags, so hopefully that means I'm a nice guy, we'll see. But anyway, moving on to the second trailer, it starts with Adonis training outdoors, and you hear him saying, "If we don't do what we love, then we wouldn't exist." And that's a great line. I mean, I think it's important that we all do things that we love, that we have a passion for, and and I think that's one thing. Like, for example, I'm an actor, and I'm also a high school sports commentator, and some people, including in my family, don't understand why I pour so much of myself into things that make me very little money, and it's because they don't understand my passion, and these are things I don't make much money on. I make a little, but not much. But I would do them if I made. I would still do them if I made no money at all. I think we all need things that make us want to get out of bed in the morning, and acting and sports commentary are two things that do it for me. And you know, I mean, I remember when I drove for Uber a few years ago. I once gave a ride to a girl, I guess early 20s or so, who had just broken up with her boyfriend, and she was really depressed. And I asked her, what are some things that she loves doing? And she said horseback riding. And I told her, well, go horseback riding. We all need things that make us want to get out of bed in the morning. And so, like, for example, during football season, starting about every Monday, I start thinking about the game I'm going to commentate that Friday, and I just look forward to it every day. So that's a great quote from Adonis there. And then you hear Rocky telling Adonis, "It's time, kid," possibly right before a fight. And then you hear Bianca saying possibly to Marianne, I'm not sure, but the quote is, "It's like nothing really matters to him right now, including me." And Rocky says to Adonis, "You got to think real hard about this, because you've got people who need you now." Presumably referring to Adonis's wife or girlfriend Bianca and their new child. And then Adonis says, "I'm taking the fight." And at that point, you don't know who the fight is against. But then you then you hear a reporter says, Victor Drago, son of Ivan Drago, who infamously killed Apollo Creed, appeared today to issue a challenge to Adonis Creed. And when you see, and this time, not only is Adonis's opponent mentioned by name, as opposed to, only briefly showing that he's a Drago there in the first trailer, this time you get a look at the face, a clear look at the face of Victor Drago, who's played by a real-life Romanian boxer named Florian Munteanu. Let me check that again. Florian Munteanu, Munteanu, and I actually found out the pronunciation by going to a Romanian news broadcast so I could hear a native speaker say it. And then also when Ivan Drago is mentioned, we see the return of Dolph Lundgren 33 years later. And it occurred to me, that's got to be one of the longest gaps between an actor playing a certain character in movie history. The longest one I can think of is Rick Deckard, played by Harrison Ford in the two Blade Runner movies, 35 years apart. And then I don't know if this counts or not, but Gene Kelly played a character named Danny McGuire in CoverGirl, which was released in 1943, and then another character by that name in Xanadu in 1980, and I don't know if that counts as the same character or not, but as far as where it's definitely in the same series, 35 years between those two Blade Runner movies is the longest that I'm aware of. So this is just, this, Dolph Lundgren playing Drago, just 2 years less than that, and Dolph Lundgren has aged very well. He doesn't look a whole lot different than he did 33 years ago. He does look older, but, he looks like he's in pretty good shape for 61, and, he was an avid bodybuilder, so it looks like he's stayed in shape very well over the years. And then Rocky says, "Don't do this," and Adonis says, "I ain't got a choice." And Rocky says, "That's the same thing your father said, and he died right here in my hands. That kid was that kid was raised in hate. He's dangerous." And then presumably referring to Ivan Drago, Rocky says, "He broke things in me that ain't never been fixed. It ain't worth it." And then amid a collage of other shots, Bianca says, "It's not just us anymore, Dee," presumably referring to their child. And Adonis says, possibly to his mother, "I want to rewrite history." And Marianne responds, "If you want to fight this man, that's your business, but don't pretend this is about your father." And the character of Marianne Creed, it's interesting, there are two characters in two characters in series history who previously were gone for 30 years and came back played by different actresses. Marie, who was played by Jodie Letizia in the original, and then in a couple of deleted scenes in Rocky V, and then played by Marianne. I'm sorry, played by Geraldine Hughes in Rocky Balboa, and then Marianne Creed was played by Sylvia Meals in Rocky II and Rocky IV, and then did not appear again in the series until Rocky Balboa. Excuse me, until Creed 30 years after Rocky IV, and came back to played by Felicia Rashad. And in both cases, I think that had they kept the same actress for each character, it would have been very hard to pull off the changes in the character, because I mean, Jodie Letizia in the original Rocky was very, very crass, abrasive, whereas Geraldine Hughes as Marie was very calm and gentle. And then again, with Marianne Creed, Sylvia Meals, and granted it was a very lightly developed character, but she seemed more meek and submissive, not very forceful. And then Felicia Rashad played the character as a very strong, assertive, not terribly controlling, but certainly blunt, and maybe a little bit jaded. And again, it's not a huge stretch to think that a person can change a lot in 30 years, but I think certainly changing the actresses in both cases made it easier to make the transition for the character. And it does seem that Marianne is continuing, much like the character was in the last, in the movie Creed 3 years ago. And I guess what the point of that line, "Don't pretend this is about your father," I guess Adonis feels like this is about avenging his father's death, and Marianne, I guess, is turned off by that, by Adonis's attitude about that. And then Adonis says, I guess to Bianca, "This won't be the end of me. It can't be, because we're a team." So that implies togetherness, that he's now trying to be, after earlier in the trailer it was implied that he had become emotionally distant. Now he realizes that his family is important. And then right before the fight, Rocky says, "Now you know what you're fighting for." And then Adonis says, "Round after round, you learn more about yourself. When I stepped in that ring, it wasn't all about me." And amid those lines, you see a collage of shots, including training and boxing, and so and it does appear that there is going to be some sort of moral to this story about Adonis realizing what's important in life, and realizing that while sports are important, and that they can be a great release of our energy, of our aggressiveness, of our emotions, and in a lot of ways sports can be microcosms of life, that they're not the be all and end all. They are part of life, but they're not the most important things in life. And that the most important things in life are your family, and you know, and I think that we all, deep inside, we all know that there must be some sort of existence greater than we are, whether you believe that it's God or whatever. I think we all know that there is something greater than we are out there. And you know, I believe very strongly that we're in this life to learn and grow. And it does seem like, you know, the character of Adonis does wise up, you know, a lot in this movie. And certainly, you know, Rocky has generally been a very wise character. I mean, you know, obviously he made some mistakes in some of the movies, but he clearly has learned a lot over the years, and has seen a lot. And you know, I'm 47 now, and I'm to the point that, you know, I tend to give advice to younger people, you know, based on my experiences, when I know that I've lived a lot longer than they have. And I don't talk down to them. And I sometimes I learn a lot from younger people too, because they can give me a perspective that I you know, couldn't, or at least wouldn't be likely to observe myself. So you know, I always say I view everyone I meet as both my student and my teacher, but there are things that, you know, based on the number of years that I've lived, and things that I've observed, there are issues on which I, you know, can give a lot of insight to, you know, a lot of younger people. And obviously, you know, Rocky Balboa is great to do that. And you know, had Apollo Creed lived, and if he were the one who were training or advising Adonis, obviously Apollo would be good in some ways. I don't know about, you know, as far as being the wise old philosopher, although, you know, Adonis certainly proved himself to be a very effective trainer in Rocky 3, a very effective motivator. And so in the second trailer, I think better than the first, not quite as good as the second trailer from Creed 3 years ago, but still very good and gets me more interested. And then I've seen a couple of other, you know, small features online, perhaps from like Entertainment Tonight type shows, where there were profiles of the movie. And I saw a clip of a scene in which Rocky walks into Adrian's restaurant, which he's now been running for 23 years, which is not bad for a guy with only a ninth grade education. And you see this big blonde guy from behind, and then the hostess tells Rocky that big guy said he wanted to talk to you and that you'll remember him. And then Rocky goes up to him, and it turns out to be Drago, and you hear Drago say, speaking semi-articulate English, because of you I lose everything. And then, you know, saying, I guess later in the conversation, I have son, this is all he knows. And so it'll be interesting to see, you know, how the character of Adonis Creed, or excuse me, how the character of Ivan Drago develops. Of course, he was probably intentionally so very lightly developed in the original. Had only 6 speaking lines through the whole film, and you don't really get to know him very well. Although there are a couple of revealing moments. Like one is when, at the end of the Apollo press conference, when he shoves that he shoves the cardboard cutout of Apollo, and then near the end, I think it was right before the last round of the Rocky fight, when that Soviet bureaucrat tells Drago, listen to them, our people cheer for him, and then slaps Drago in the head and says, win. And then Drago picks up the guy, in a pretty corny moment, picks him up with one glove, and shoves him out to the crowd, while his wife, played by Brigitte Nielsen, says in a very convincing Russian accent, "Niet," and then Drago says, subtitle into English, "I fight to win, for me, for me." So that gave me a clue that, you know, he feels like, you know, screw fighting for my country. You know, I'm doing this for myself. And of course, the whole thing about the USSR is that they wanted absolute loyalty to the state, so there was some rebellion about that. And obviously, after Drago lost in Rocky IV, he could not have been brought back as an opponent and been credible, because there would be no illusion of invincibility. I remember back during the time when I was back when I was growing up in the '80s, I watched a fair amount of professional boxing, especially a lot of the heavyweight title fights, and I remember the absolute shock when Mike Tyson lost to James Buster Douglas. And for about 3 or 4 years before that, Tyson was believed to be invincible. And by the way, Douglas, in the fight in which he beat Tyson, was a 42-1 underdog. And to put that in perspective, in the original Rocky, the title character was a 50-1 underdog against Apollo Creed. So it was almost a real life Rocky type story. But anyway, even though Tyson, Tyson lost probably in large part because he had lost his focus and let his conditioning slip. But I think that even after that, even though I knew he had the potential to still be a great fighter, he was only 23. I also knew that now the illusion that he was unbeatable, which a lot of people believed he was, that was gone forever, and he just never attracted the same fear after that, because there was no mystique about him anymore. However, now that 33 years have passed, it's really interesting to explore what happens to the character, and it's interesting that he says it in that clip, because of you I lose everything. So I don't know exactly what that means. If maybe he was banished to Siberia. Of course, the USSR dissolved only 6 years later, but there's a lot of possibilities that could happen. And from various things I've read and seen it in these clips, it seems like he's trying to rebuild his legacy through his son. And I read another account in which his son is trying to do this to get his father's approval, which of course is age old. Every boy has the inherent desire to feel that his father is proud of him. That's something I've struggled with, feeling like my father's not proud of me, and I've certainly tried to make my son always know that while I want him to always do his best, I always love him. My love is unconditional, and I'm always proud of him. And so certainly you have a lot of potentially great storylines there. Obviously, with Adonis, trying to struggle with trying to, and also there's a clip I've seen online in which Adonis says, he killed my pops, I can't let that slide. So you see Adonis sees this as somehow avenging his father's death, even though if he wins, obviously it's not going to bring his father back. But I can see it's human nature. You want to do that. And then Rocky, obviously, is a wise old philosopher. And although it is, I kind of shake my head a little bit, even with his wisdom, that he's trying to talk Adonis out of this fight. Just like you as the viewer that the fight's going to take place, just as you knew when people were trying to talk when like Adrian, for example, was trying to talk Rocky out of his fights. You knew he was going to do it anyway, and Rocky should know, just like he was a fighter, that was who he was, what he did. It's the same is true with Adonis. So, I guess maybe they always think there needs to be somebody who's against the who's against the title character going ahead with the fight. Although apparently Bianca and Marianne are as well. But anyway, and by the way, based on I haven't read anything or seen anything about this movie that gives me any clue that Rocky's lymphoma from the original Creed is is explored. You know, that apparently it seems like, you know, it's never going to be mentioned. I could be wrong, but I've never seen any evidence of that. And you know, I figured that it was, you know, at the, you know, I just figured it was a plot device to make the original more dramatic. And even though like Michelle Gusto and I said in our episode on Creed, I wasn't crazy about. I felt like it. I'm not a big fan of chemotherapy, and I don't like the notion that it's the only option, that it's get chemotherapy or die, when there are other treatment options as well. But I did like the idea about, you know, Rocky and Adonis both fighting. You know, the whole thing, if I fight, you fight. And then, you know, Rocky, right before the last round of the, you know, fight against right before the last fight, right before the last round of the fight between Adonis and Pretty Ricky Conlon, Rocky telling Adonis, "You've taught me how to fight again." Um, but you know, Rocky obviously is, you know, still, you know, a lonely man, and you know, Adrian and Polly and Mickey have died now for many years. You know, they're long gone now, and apparently Rocky Jr. is not in this one. I know in the last Creed, well, in the original Creed, it was said that Rocky Jr. was living in Vancouver with his girlfriend, and you know, had felt, you know, felt that he was in his father's shadow, and of course that plot line was explored, you know, deeply in Rocky Balboa, which is still my favorite film in the series, by the way. And so then, you know, obviously you have, you know, then Drago looking for redemption, and his son Victor apparently trying to make his father proud, and then Bianca, you know, trying to get the attention and, you know, love of her boyfriend or husband. So yeah, you've got a lot of, you know, great potential storylines there, and I'm just really excited about this. And one thing that I hope is explored also is whether or what the situation is with Victor's mother. You know, is Victor the son of Ivan and Ludmila, who was played by Brigitte Nielsen in Rocky IV, who at the time was Sylvester Stallone's wife, but they would only be together for about 18 months. And although Brigitte has certainly made a great achievement just a few months ago when she gave birth to a child at the age of 54, outdoing Janet Jackson by 4 years. So it'll be interesting to find out if we know who Victor's mother is. But anyway, though, and I'm also curious as to what kind of chemistry Dolph Lundgren and Florian Munteanu have together. And you know, one thing for me, and I'm probably one of the few people who feels this way, I happen to be a Swedish American, and to me, Dolph Lundgren looks so distinctly Swedish. I have a very hard time taking him seriously as a Russian, and then I have a very hard time taking him seriously as, you know, playing the father of the Florian Munteanu character, because you know, I think Munteanu looks very Eastern European, but nevertheless, you know, Lundgren, you know, other than looking Swedish, I think, you know, he was perfectly cast, you know, as Ivan Drago for the original. And it's certainly interesting to explore what happens to, and I got sidetracked from this point earlier, but it's interesting to explore what happens to someone like that 33 years later, who, you know, someone who was believed to be invincible, and then, you know, he had a fall from grace, and what, you know, to find out what he's been doing all these years and what struggles he's been having, and you know, now trying to redeem himself through his son, which so many parents often very misguidedly try to find, you know, redemption or fulfillment through their children, rather than just helping their children be the best version of themselves they can be. Like I always say, you know, I never tried to push Arya, my daughter, or Liam, my son, into anything. I just want Arya to be the best Arya she can be, and Liam be the best Liam she can be. They're totally different people, and that's fine. I just want each to be the best version of himself or herself that he or she is capable of being. And So anyway, when you have, you know, great characters like that and so many great storylines, you've got a lot of potential. And Stallone knows this formula very well, and you know, I'm very thankful that Ryan Coogler decided, that he came up with the idea of continuing the Rocky series by spinning it off into Creed, but keeping Stallone there on board and keeping the Rocky character going. I think the one thing that I'm concerned about, and Michelle Gusso and I have discussed this as well, is we really wonder, is Adonis an interesting enough character, or not, maybe not interesting enough, but is he a character who the audience is going to love enough that the series, you know, is going to be able to survive without the help of Stallone? You know, if Stallone either, if Stallone ever reaches the point that he's unable or unwilling to continue in the Creed series, will audiences care enough? I don't know. Adonis, you know, he's someone who, I mean, he's a good character. I just don't know that he's the type of character who's just going to resonate with people's hearts the way that Rocky does. Yeah, we'll see, but nevertheless, I'm so glad that the character of Rocky has survived all these years, 42 years now since the original Rocky, and is still as interesting as ever, and has continued to grow very logically and still be very inspiring even now that Stallone is 72. And so it's just you know, just I'm very excited. And you know, I remember right before Creed, a few days before, I was looking at trivia on IMDb, and I saw, you know, I overlooked the spoiler warning, where I saw, you know, that Conlon won the fight, and I'm trying to find out nothing as far as the ending goes. So because you know, you only see a movie for the first time once, and I just want that surprise that I'll never get to have again, you know. So, you know, that emotional jolt. And you know, every Rocky movie, even Rocky 5, even though I consider it to be the worst in the series, the ending I think was awesome, and I think that would have been a great end for the character. But thankfully, you know, thankfully it wasn't. But you know, every Rocky movie, you know, has left me on a major emotional high, where I was just so fired up and so emotional. And some of the movies are better than others, but they all hit me emotionally. And you know, I especially remember in Rocky 4 when Drago went down, the audience erupted in applause as if it were a real sporting event. And what I would say to anybody who doesn't like the movie, I don't mind people pointing out things that are wrong with the movie, but I'll tell you, when you get your audience to react like that, you've done your job. And that means more than, you know, any critical praise or anything else, when you hit people emotionally like that. And that's, I want to do that with my movies as well. And you know, like a couple of weeks ago, well, it was back on November 2nd, I went to see the movie Bohemian Rhapsody. I was a big fan, you know, as a kid of the rock music group Queen. And even though there are flaws with the movie, particularly inaccuracies, both things that are fabricated and then things that are out of sequence, but I was so moved by Rami Malek's sensational Oscar-worthy portrayal of the late Queen lead vocalist Freddie Mercury, one of the great rock performers, maybe the greatest rock stage performer of all time. I got tears in my eyes during the final concert sequence. And again, regardless of the flaws that movie has, when you're moved like that, again, the movie's done its job. And the first 7 Rocky movies, at least for me, did that, and obviously for a lot of other people too. And I'm confident that this one will as well. And you know, one thing that I think was especially true of the movie Rocky Balboa, which again is my favorite in the series, you know, we saw so many of the characters in that movie facing various demons. You know, Rocky, Paulie, Mason Dixon, Marie, and you know, it was just it was a very, you know, emotional movie about a very emotional movie about facing your demons and overcoming adversity. And this movie has a lot of potential like that too. And you know, one storyline I would like to see explored again in future films in the series, if there are any, which hopefully there will be. I'd like to see, you know, the Rocky Junior, the Rocky slash Rocky Junior relationship re-explored, and you know, that would have a lot of potential. And of course, Sage Stallone, who played Rocky Jr. in Rocky 5, died in 2012 um, of a heart attack. But Milo Ventimiglia, who most recently played Rocky Balboa, that was back in, excuse me, Milo Ventimiglia, who most recently played Rocky Jr., that was back in the movie Rocky Balboa. He's still living, and he said he would be interested in you know, playing that role again. So who knows? I mean, there are a lot of possibilities, and I remember, you know, after Rocky Balboa, hoping that if there were if there was another Rocky movie, I would hope that Rocky and Marie would be married, because I thought that, you know, they could be very good for each other. And as it turned out, that Marie and her son Steps both were not mentioned in Creed, and apparently won't be in the new one as well. I didn't see either of those names I didn't see either of those names in the list of characters on IMDb, nor did I see the name of Ludmila Drago, who is Ivan's wife in Rocky 4. So anyway, oh, and another thing, that I saw one synopsis of the movie mentioned Drago doing steroids, which was implied in Rocky 4 in the Hearts on Fire training montage. You know, you see him take that shot, which I guess is implied to be steroids. And of course, it was at the press conference early in the movie. It was asked if, you know, he was involved in doping or something like that. I don't remember the exact line, but it would be interesting if that comes up, especially because that's been such a hot issue now. Yeah, I guess it's, you know, it's really one of those things that's an even bigger, more publicized issue now than it was at the time that Rocky 4 came out 33 years ago. And so now, let's see, it's 1:08 p.m. here, Eastern Standard Time. That's GMT -5. And tonight I have a basketball game to commentate. Actually commentated a girls game for the high school whose athletic department I voice. That's Cascade High School in Clayton, Indiana, which is 15 miles west of Indianapolis. And I commentated their girls team tonight. Here's my Cascade Lady Cadets my Cascade Lady Cadets basketball hoodie. And then tonight I'm going to commentate the boys team, and the broadcast should end around 9:15. Then I'm going over to, I guess, either Avon or Plainfield, Indiana, both western suburbs of Indianapolis, to see Creed. I know that the Avon Theater shows it at 10:15. I'm not sure about the Plainfield Theater. And the Avon Theater, by the way, is where I saw both Rocky Balboa and Creed. So anyway, really excited about seeing it. This will be my 6th consecutive Rocky movie that I will see in a theater, and so very excited about it. And yeah, the first one, the first Rocky movie I saw in the theater, by the way, was Rocky 3. That was back in summer vacation between grades 5 and 6. That was the first Rocky movie I ever saw, and then I went back and I saw the first 2 on TV over the next few years before Rocky 4 came out. And I saw both Rocky 3 and Rocky 4 at the Ohio Theater in my hometown of Madison, Indiana, and then Rocky 5 I saw at 2 separate theaters in Clarksville, Indiana, at the 2 malls there, the Green Tree and River Falls. And then Rocky Balboa I saw at the, I don't remember the name of it, but it's the theater in Avon. And then Creed I saw at that theater again, and then I took Michelle Gusso to see it at the theater up at the Castleton Mall up on the northeast side of the city. And so anyway, it's I just have so many great memories about seeing all those movies, and hopefully, you know, there are going to be a lot more. But Stallone, you know, he created a monster, and I hope there'll be I hope there will be more Rocky movies, and I also hope there will be some more extended. So I hope there will be some extended cuts released of the previous movies, because I know there are a lot of deleted scenes, and in fact there were the original cuts of both Rocky 4 and Rocky Balboa. I know were both about 2.5 hours. They cut about an hour off Rocky 4 and about 45 minutes off of Rocky Balboa. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, I would like to, you know, see, even if just releasing some of the deleted scenes, but especially I'd like to see the extended. I'd like to see the original cut of Rocky 4, because I know that you know, that, like I said in the episode on that movie, that came out at a time when movie companies were really pressuring, where movie studios were really pressuring filmmakers to keep their movies down to 90 minutes to get more showings in a day, and that practice ended around 1992 when movie theaters started showing the same movie simultaneously on more than one screen. But during the approximately 9 years before that, from about 1983 to 92, you had a lot of movies with underdeveloped plots, and Rocky 4 was one of them. It's a great movie, but the story was a little thin, I think, in part because the movie was so short because of, you know, pressure. But and by the way, I just noticed here on the IMDb page that Brigitte Nielsen is listed as playing Ludmila Drago. So it'll be interesting to see, you know, if that's correct or not. But you know, or it could be that it's only in, like, it could be that she's credited because she's in flashbacks from Rocky 4. I don't know. We'll see. And it's also showing, well, it's showing Milo Ventimiglia playing Robert Balboa, or in other words, Rocky Jr. So, well, that's the first I've seen about that. And again, maybe it's archive footage. I don't know. But they're both. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Ventimiglia is mentioned 9th in the cast, and Nielsen 12th. So, you know, we'll see what happens. I'm really curious about it. But another thing I forgot to mention earlier is I read that that Adonis actually, one of the synopses I read of the movie implies that Adonis either is already the champion, or he's either already the champion when the movie starts, or becomes champion during the movie. And two of the characters mentioned are, although they're shown briefly, I know Danny Stuntman Wheeler, played by real life boxer Andre Ward, is briefly shown in one of the trailers, and you know, maybe Adonis beats Danny Stuntman Wheeler early in the movie, and so it's and also Wood Harris, who played Little Duke, who worked at the gym where Adonis tried to train in the original, and is the son. The character is the son of Duke, who was Apollo's trainer, and then Rocky's trainer later on. Is shown as one of the characters in this movie as well. So, you know, maybe they just that's Danny Stuntman Wheeler and Little Duke both have small roles, and they just, you know, figure that, you know, Adonis winning the heavyweight or the light heavyweight championship is a fairly minor detail. Maybe they figure that, you know, that wouldn't be a very compelling storyline if that were the main thing he was going for. And you think about it, I mean, the last uh, of the six Rocky movies, not counting Creed, of the six movies in which Rocky were the main character, in the last three, he's not fighting for a championship because that would have been anticlimactic by that point. So, and I guess this fight against Victor Drago, I think it is going to be for a championship, but where that's not the main issue, I guess there's just a lot at stake for all of the characters. So, anyway, well, it's been 42 years now since the original Rocky was released, and I remember, going to see Rocky Rocky 5 the day. It was the Saturday. It premiered on a Rocky 5 premiered on a Friday, and then I went to see it the next day. And let me see here. Open up the Wikipedia page, because I think it was 28 years ago. Oh, okay, it was a little earlier than that. It was released November 16th, 1990, so I saw it the next day then. And yeah, it's a little over 28, so it's 28 years and 4 days now since I first saw Rocky 5. And, I remember I probably had a few tears in my eyes. I don't remember. I know I was very emotional, not only by the ending of that movie, but then by the closing credits, which are a series of black and white stills, chronologically, that span the 5 movies up to that point, and they're set to the beautiful Elton John song "Measure of a Man." And I remember I was 19 years old at the time, thinking that was it, this great inspirational series, and we've just seen the end of Rocky Balboa walking off into the twilight of his life with his brain damage, and wondering if he's just going to have a sad death in which he's becomes vegetated. But now here we are 28 years later, and I'm 47 and it's still not over. So, who knows how it's going to, who knows how much longer it's going to go on. And, maybe someday there will be Rockies, maybe there will be Creed movies without, Rocky, and maybe, someday, Adonis Creed will be training somebody, Who knows, the future's wide open. But keep in mind, though, that Sylvester Stallone's mother, Jackie, she turns 97 years old on November 29th, a week from tomorrow. And so, Sylvester's 72, so he might have quite a few more years and quite a few more Rockies still left in him. And it's just, everyone that comes out I'll see and I'll treasure it, and I just hope that, I hope it'll be a great addition to the Rocky legacy. And Rocky 5, I think, is the only movie that's not a great addition to the legacy, although it has some great moments. I feel like what went wrong with it is that because Rocky 4 was so big, that Rocky 5 almost had to be made, even though there wasn't a natural next step to go to. And it just seemed like it was a little forced, but but Stallone redeemed the series with Rocky Balboa. And by the way, I think with Rocky 5, another thing is, as I've alluded to before, I think Tommy Morrison was not a good choice for a lead role. I think Richard Gant playing George Washington Duke, the Don King parody, could have worked well for comic relief as a supporting character, but the way that the character dominated the movie, it just became so corny, so pro wrestling like. But there are a lot of great moments in the movie as well. And in fact, that movie actually contains my favorite scene in the series, the Rocky Adrian dramatic scene out in the streets. And it hits me very hard emotionally, because like I said, back in the Rocky 5 era, back in the Rocky 5 episode, I've never been loved like that, the way that Adrian loves Rocky there. And I don't think I ever will be, even though I've loved women like that. None have ever loved me like that. And again, I don't think I'll ever be loved like that. I hope I'm wrong. You know, we'll see. If I ever am, I know I'll appreciate it, having waited so long for it. But you know, that brings me to another thing. I remember I was really disappointed when I found out that Adrian was not going to be in Rocky Balboa. That the character has died, because I'm a huge Talia Shire fan, and you know, between her performances as Adrian and then her performances as Connie in The Godfather, and she got an Oscar nomination for each, by the way, for Rocky and then for The Godfather Part 2, which I think makes her the most underrated two-time Oscar-nominated actor or actress of all time. She's very, very rarely mentioned as, you know, one of the elite actresses in Hollywood, but I sure think she is. But, you know, I think that her absence, you know, and Rocky dealing with Adrian's death certainly made Rocky Balboa, you know, very powerful. And I feel like if Adrian were still there, I just feel like there wouldn't be quite the emotional impact, and you know, certainly the memory of her, you know, is very beautifully portrayed in Rocky Balboa, and to a lesser extent in Creed. You know, there wasn't as much about, you know, Adrian in there, but there were, you know, some nice moments there. You know, especially when he, you know, talks to her when he visits her tombstone, and then also when he mentions to Adonis about, you know, what it would be like, how happy he would be if he could just have one more day with his wife. So, all right, well, you know, I've talked for an hour and 11 minutes over two trailers that are about 4 or 5 minutes long combined. So, I guess I'm even more dangerous by myself than I am with Michelle. And again, I'm very sorry for her absence, but anyway, I think I'm gonna wrap this up here and post this video online so I can make sure I get it out before the movie actually comes out, although there were some advanced showings last night. But today is the official release date, so anyway, hopefully it'll be a great movie, and regardless, I will do a super deep movie analysis episode on it in a few months. And then, you know, I have quite a few episodes of non-Rocky movies on the back burner, and I look forward to those as well. I've been very busy. I've done 40 film roles this year, so I'm a very busy man, in addition to my sports commentary career and my two jobs on top of that. So, you know, all work and no play makes Lec a dull boy, so I got to take time to do some more episodes, because I really enjoy these, and I hope you do too. So anyway, I hope to see you again soon with some new episodes, and in the meantime, hope to see you at the theater in a few hours to see Creed 2, and, you know, every day when, you know, a new Rocky related film comes out, it's like, you know, a holiday for me, except better, because, you know, holidays come once a year, and this, now it's coming to, you know, start going back to Rocky 5. There have been 28, in the subsequent 28 years, only 3 films, so this is almost like a once a decade experience, so I'm going to treasure it for all it's worth, and you know, hopefully this won't be the last, but regardless, I have no doubt that at this point Stallone is not going to do anything that's not going to be a very worthy addition to his legacy and to the Rocky legacy. Well, this concludes Supplement 3. As always, thank you so much for joining me, and I cordially invite you to do so again in the near future for whatever our next episode or supplement is. And in the meantime, feel free to share this episode or supplement, and feel free to like Super Deep Movie Analysis on Facebook. Until we meet again for Super Deep Movie Analysis, this is Lec Zorn reminding you, there is a difference only you can make.